Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for staff. I'm wondering where we're at with the funding for that was used to fund this contract. And it looks like the contract was $2.4 million roughly. This is to add $161,000. Sounds like for good reason to remediate the lead paint situation, which needs to happen at this point in the process of upgrading the jail in the city-county building. But I'm curious as to where we're at in terms of money that's already been borrowed to do this work, and if staff could tell me what's left.
The controller's right behind you, so I will ask him to respond.
I don't have that information available here at the meeting, but I could certainly follow up with Supervisor Wegleitner with an accounting of the. I'm assuming you're talking about the $8 million that was budgeted and where we are with that.
Yes. You haven't.
I would hesitate to answer without a full accounting of the project status and other elements that may not be part of that and what's been spent so far.
On Resolution 367, is there discussion? Supervisor Wegleitner. Supervisor Wegleitner.
I have, Madam Chair, thank you. Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions for staff. First, I want to thank the speakers who came out. I think the testimony was overwhelming. Once again, very compelling, very rooted in fact, very rooted in personal experience, traumatic, harmful impact by people whose family members who have been incarcerated unnecessarily and unfairly, and who have been victimized by a broken criminal and justice system that perpetuates in Dane County. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for speaking your truth. Thank you for informing us on your opposition to this. I do have a couple of questions for staff. The first one I think is for the controller, and that is how much this resolution authorizes the bonding for the entire $76 million for the jail project. So my question for staff is, how much is expected to be spent in the 2018 budget year?
Well, recently there was a request for proposals for a construction manager was issued. The next step would be for our request for proposal for the architect engineer. So at this point, the $76 million will be borrowed primarily in 2019 and 2020. So there may be $5 million this year, and the balance over those other 2 years, depending on the construction schedule and the schedule of payments that will be due to the contractor once that's let.
Thank you. Follow up. So can you explain for folks who might be a little confused by this process as to what this resolution does? Because you said we would be borrowing it next year, but this is authorizing borrowing for the entire $76 million. Can you explain why that entire $76 million is in this resolution?
Well, the practice of the county is to include authorization for borrowing for all the capital projects, and you can see that the list in this resolution is pretty extensive, so that those projects can move forward, and that when the time is right for the borrowing based on the project schedule and the payments that are due, that we can schedule that borrowing at that time once those costs begin to be incurred.
Thank you. So I guess from what I take away from that is we're not actually borrowing yet, we're authorizing it. I guess my concerns are the same as they were in the capital budget deliberations. My concerns center around the 777 homeless single adults, the 276 chronically homeless individuals, the 31 homeless single veterans, the 65 homeless youth, the 90 homeless families, and the 19 chronically homeless families. That's 1,258 identified homeless we have on our community priority list. What's not in this borrowing resolution is authority to borrow. I had offered an amendment for $25 million to house people on this priority list. It wouldn't have covered the whole list. It would have maybe covered 130, 140 people on the list. But it would have been real tangible, and it would have provided something that we know works to support people, to provide stability, to reduce recidivism and cycling in and out of jail because of poverty, homelessness, substance use. So I don't think that this resolution, this authority to borrow at this point in time, is a good reflection of the values of this board. Because I've heard us talk a lot about our concern for reducing our racial disparities and trying to lead on issues. I've seen, extensive committee work on producing recommendations for this board. A lot of community time invested, a lot of people coming to testify, a lot of staff time involved, and reports, audits, lists go on and on and on of the things that we could be doing. We're in fact actually, moving forward slightly with a feasibility study for a crisis restoration center in our mental health system and identifying some gaps there, which, as we heard from Ms. Smith's testimony, are significant. And that's not how it should work. So why? Why are we authorizing the $76 million in borrowing right now when there's so many questions that still need to be answered? When this borrowing resolution doesn't include recommendations, other recommendations to fund a crisis restoration center, to build one, to give law enforcement, to give crisis workers another option to help somebody, to bring them someplace safe where they don't wind up in jail and they don't wind up 3 hours away, where their family can see them and support them and assist in their recovery, where they can get connected with services and supports and permanent supportive housing that they need. We've heard testimony from people who work in our mental health system. I mean, this is kicking the can down the road. This is the refusal to make tough decisions, to get off that escalator or run vigorously against it. We have to get our act together and move aggressively, because that escalator is persistent. It's built on decades, centuries of systems of oppression. It's not all our fault, but we're the ones in these seats that have to make the tough decisions. And this is one of them. And we're not even going to be spending that money this year. We don't even know what's left in our balance from the last time we borrowed $8 million because we granted $8 million of authority that didn't need to be spent at the time. That's how much mass incarceration controls the operations of this board. Doesn't even matter what the balance is, because we know we can just borrow more. We can authorize more. I think that's wrong, because every nonprofit, human services provider that we contract with, they know how much money they have left. They know what their capital improvement needs are. They know that every day they're turning away people that need help, that they can't pay their staff enough, and it's harder and harder to do their jobs. I think that's out of balance. I think something needs to change. And I don't see any reason why we have to vote for $76 million in authority for this jail construction project right now. So I'm going to be voting no, and I would ask you to think strongly about your vote and consider voting no as well.